Hi there, Michael here for the second of the Elite Dangerous Fiction Diaries. In this diary I'm going to talk to you about the approvals process that our authors are currently working through. I'm also going to be looking into a bit more detail on the Pilots Federation, and we'll finish up like we did last time with some questions from the DDF. So, starting with the approvals process, one of the things that we're trying to make sure with the Elite Fiction is that it's all consistent, that it follows the same rules in the universe, that the characters fit and the stories fit in with how the universe works. Now this is obviously quite a task for 30 odd stories, including short stories and novels, but thanks to the sort of the help of the authors that are already sort of working with us, we're getting through this process. Which a reminder for those of you who are writers, whether on the anthology, in the RPG, or any of the novels, and you haven't sent us your story proposal yet, then you should do so as soon as possible. It's best to get it approved before you start doing any real work on it. So what does the process approval entail? So at its very basic, there's the private writers forum where people can discuss ideas if they want, and we also provide background information for much of the universe. That work is still ongoing, but every week we add another little bit of information, and we also respond to people's questions and try and fill in the blanks that they need to know for their stories. So the approval process really starts when we get sent a synopsis for the story. So this is a sort of a brief overview of what the story entails, what technology it needs, what the characters are going to do. So we take a look at that and see how it fits in Elite. If it all fits great, then the story is immediately approved. If not, then we basically go into a feedback loop where we sort of highlight the bits that we think don't work or would be problematic. Sometimes we're able to say, okay, well actually that's a pretty good idea, so let's roll that into the game, which is nice. One of the things we do want to be sure about is that the writers are contributing to the sort of the rich lore that Elite has. So yes, but in some cases, and there's issues that we need to resolve, so we go back and forth until those issues have been resolved one way or the other. So when that's all done, the synopsis is approved and the writer can go ahead and write their story. If they have any questions, then obviously they can speak to us about it, or other writers as well. And then when we come to the final draft, which is some months away yet, we'll have to read through each and every one and just to do final approvals before they can be released. So that's going to be a busy time for us here, as I think there's 30 odd stories at the moment that we need to review, which is pretty good. So we're quite lucky, there's lots of good writers in amongst the group, so I'm quite looking forward to it. Although I think I'm going to be lacking sleep for a few months while that goes on. So as I mentioned previously, we're expanding the sort of the background of the universe, and one of the major organisations I'm sure many of you will know as the Pilots Federation. So this is the organisation that provides your rankings and sorts out the bounties in the game. So if we give you a little bit of history about the Pilots Federation, it started back in 2805, so in the 29th century. And basically it started as a small cooperative for independent starship pilots, where at the time it was quite a new occurrence. People were just expanding out into space. There was no real sort of organisation that sort of helped pilots look after each other, and it also saw that sort of new rise of independent ships also brought a new menace to the galaxy, and that were pirates. Now pirates were really an issue for the independent starship owners, so they banded together to try and combat this new menace, and also share information and act as a trade collective so they could get cheaper supplies for their ships and parts and new ships and so forth. And eventually they work against piracy and in helping with pilot safety. Gained them a bit of respectability with the wider population. Up until that point, independent starship captains were kind of seen as a more itinerant sort of, a bit on the outskirts of society. They were sort of rogues, I think in some ways you could compare it to the independent truckers back in the 70s and 80s in the United States. There was a sort of similar sort of ethos there. So part of the measures for battling piracy was that they introduced the bounty system. So whenever a pirate was recorded attacking a member, a bounty was put on that pirate, which could then be collected by another one of the members of the pilots. So yes, that helped. But more controversially, they started doing rankings based on the kills that the member pilots achieved of the pirates, and some outside the organisation saw that as quite bloodthirsty. So over the years, that's slowly changed, and as you play the new game, you'll see that the rating system is a little bit different, although no less controversial. But you'll see why when you start playing the game. So in 3100, they formalised the rankings of the pilots. They kind of started off as a little bit of a joke, so they had some early prizes where if you got a few kills, then you'd get a little award of being mostly harmless, which I'm sure many of you remember being ranked as. But that process became more formalised, and around the same time in 3100, there was the first elite pilot, Commander Peter Jameson, who was the first ever elite pilot, and he actually had his badge emblazoned on his ship, which isn't something most people do, but he's the first, so I think that was fine. So as the years progressed, I mean, elite pilots are obviously something special, and the Federation discovered that there wasn't really enough pilots to go around. And they made what was a controversial decision at the time, was to invite pilots who weren't elite rated, but were deadly or dangerous, or, you know, they were very competent pilots into this new elite Federation of pilots. So that they had greater manpower to be able to respond to the issues that the Federation has to deal with. Still a controversial aspect of the Federation is that they're very ubiquitous. Wherever you go in human-controlled space, the Pilots Federation is there. So even in Imperial space and Federation space, the shipboard systems that you use are powered by the Pilots Federation. The bounty system is used everywhere, and some have seen this as being too that they have too much level of control. But they're a very trusted organisation, and you know, in some ways they do more for the safety of pilots and people in sort of the fringes of human controlled space than the government militaries do. So not too much is said of that. But you'll certainly be able to explore some of these facets in some of the fiction. And also in game. So let's go on to the DDF questions. So I need to sort of glance down at these. I haven't memorized them. So the first question is from Gimme. Will the Elite Universe background documentation given to the fiction writers be released to all players after the game has been released? So that's probably no. The background information we provided actually contains a lot of sensitive information about things that might happen in the future. So we won't be releasing those to people generally. It's possible that we might do a sanitized version sometime in the future, but we'll have to see. So our second question is from Commandante. Will there be other planet like Earths capable of sustaining life? So yes, habitable worlds are quite common, or not necessarily habitable, but ones that can be terraformed. They're quite common in the galaxy. Life is pretty common, but as I mentioned in the last fiction diary, sentient life isn't that common. Although there is sort of intelligent life to the sort of level of primates and dolphins, that kind of thing. And the last question is from Dusty. To what extent will nanotech work? So nanotech is one of those things that hasn't quite fulfilled the potential that people imagined it would in the history of the Elite Universe. It is quite commonplace in industrial processes, not as much in medical use as the sort of better alternatives, so bioengineered viruses, that kind of work, gene therapies and so forth. The problem with it is it's actually quite expensive. So there are more efficient ways from a cost point of view, especially as energy is very cheap in the Elite universe. However, it does have its niche uses. So long-range explorers utilize nanotech for repairing ship systems and structural damage and so forth. So it does have its uses, but it's not the world-changing tech that people here in the 21st century think it might become. So thank you very much for listening and watching this fiction diary. I'll be back in a few weeks with the new one, and yes, looking forward to it. Thanks very much.